It's a bird! It's a plane! It's... Have you ever wondered where the superheroes come from? How they came to be? Well, I'm here to tell you. They came from comic books. My sister and I like the superheroes. We have always wanted to know where they came from. So I thought I would investigate into the history of the comic books, for that is where the superheroes first got their start. They're like fairy tales for grown-ups, said Stan Lee, former president and chairman of Marvel's Comics, the legendary creator of Spider-Man, Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, and the Fantastic Four. Lee says the idea of having supernatural powers appeals to people of all ages. Superheroes can do wonderful things that we can't, Lee says. People find that exciting to read and to dream about. The comics of superheroes are split into at least two groups, the DC and the Marvels. These are two publishers or writers that we like. The one publisher writer of comic books is the DC Detective Comic Company. The DC started out being called the National Periodical Publication. The other publisher writer is Marvel's company. Marvel started out being called Timely Comics. The superheroes have weaknesses. The idea comes from the Old Testament. Samson in the Old Testament had a weakness, that if he cut his hair, his strength would go away. So the creators gave the superheroes weaknesses. For instance, kryptonite for Superman. Some of the Greek gods inspired some of the superheroes. For instance, the Greek god Hermes inspired the Flash. There are 13 stages or eras or time periods for things to happen. These are the 1933 American comic books began, 1938 to 1956, the Golden Age, 1956 to 1971, the Silver Age, 1961, Marvel's Age, 1964, graphic novels came out, 1972, underground comic books and alternative comic books came out, 1971 to 1980, Bronze Age, 1979, the Grim and Gritty Age, 1980 to 1987, the Iron Age, 1986, Gimmick Age, 1987 to present, Modern Age, 1992, graphic novels came out. What is a comic book? At its simplest, a comic book is a series of words and pictures that are present in a sequential manner to form a narrative that may or may not be humorous. Originating in the United States in the late 1800s, the comic books contained everyday language, slang, and idiom, as well as color and a sophisticated interplay between text and images. The first comic book was a book of funnies. The funnies included in this book were Buster Brown was one, Foxy Grandpa was another one of these funnies. Another funny was Crazy Cat. Then there was also Catajama Kid. Popeye was a good one. And then there was Matt and Jeff. Comic books were not just in the U.S. In the 18th century, or around 1798, comic books started in Japan. They were in Europe around 1830. They were in Britain around 1884. Around 1927 to 1995, they were in Italy. They came out in the U.S. around 1930. Marvel's Comics established a UK office in 1972. The first comic strip was Richard Fallon Outcasts, The Yellow Kid, in 1895. In Joseph Pizzo's The New York World, the first era was in 1933. American comic books began. The first age was in the 1938 to 1956, the Golden Age. Comic books blossomed into a district entertainment industry after 1938. The superheroes that came out in this era was Superman was the first superhero, Batman was the next superhero, then there was Wonder Woman, Captain America came out next and was an enduring character, then the Flash came out, Green Lantern came next, the Human Torch came next and was another enduring character. The last one that came out in this era was Plastic Man. The Golden Age commonly relied on magic or mysticum. We then have the 1956 to 1971 Silver Age. In the Silver Age, there was a lack of purpose, so the writers came up with the Comic Code Authority. Marvel's comics further renovated the superheroes by creating characters that had some kind of weakness or default. Two of these heroes with weaknesses were the Hulk was one of these heroes. Dr. Bruce Banner was afraid of his temple. He was afraid to turn into the Hulk. The other was Spider-Man. He wasn't immortal, so he could still die. Both Marvels and DC came up with groups. The DC came up with the Justice League of America. Marvels came up with the Fantastic Four. The Silver Age explained superhero phenomenon. Then we have the next age, which was the 1961 Marvel's Age. The next stage was in the 1964 graphic novels. Then we have the stage of the 1970s underground comic books and alternative comic books. The underground comics was during the early 1970s. Alternative comics was during the late 1970s. The next age was the 1971 to 1980 Bronze Age. Comic books were still largely carried by traditional newsstands. The writers were still having trouble, so they came up with two things to help them sell more comics. One was the Academic of Comic Books Act, the other was the Comic Grid. During this era, movies, cartoons, and series came out featuring the superheroes. These were the Super Friends cartoons came out, and Batman cartoons came out. Then there was Wonder Woman series came out, and the Incredible Hulk series came out. Then there was the animated Fantastic Four came out. The Superman movie starring Christopher Reeves also came out. Marvel's also bought the rights to print Star Wars comic books. Then we have the 1979 Grim and Gritty Age. The next age was 1980 to 1987, the Iron Age. The Iron Age extended the Bronze Age. Heroes needed to be the subject of the comic books stories rather than the means to tell a story. The heroes began focusing on their own mentality. 4 of the superheroes died during this era. These 4 were Captain Marvel, died in 1982, Batman, or he died at least figuratively. The Watchman went into hiding because he didn't want to die by telling the truth. Superman died in Lois Lane's arms. The books were distributed to specialized comic book retail outlets rather than newsstands. We then had 1986 Gimmick Age. We are now in the 1987 to the present modern age. Comic books have become collector's items. In the modern age, we have 1992 graphic novels. So, have you really wondered? Well, now you know. That is where and how the superheroes came to be. That is the history of the comic books, because comic books started it all. From the funnies to superheroes to superhero movies, we have the history. The Marvels and the DC went from comics to TV. We have from the newsstands to collector's items. The time frame is from the 1800s to 2015. There's no reason why superheroes shouldn't go on forever, says Stan Lee. Though children shed their capes as they grow up, Lee says superheroes are ageless, and their stories are timeless for new generations in search of champions. Who doesn't like superheroes? Now, when you watch a superhero movie like Superman, Batman, or The Avengers, you will know where the characters came from and the history behind them.